Hi, welcome to Kadosh Life today. We're having Jaymee Jay joining today, and I'm super excited to talk with her. She reached out to me after seeing me on Sean McCann's show, and she's done some other recordings with him, and I'm just excited to talk to her because she knows a lot about SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and she has a lot of knowledge and information about Mormonism because she's grown up around, has, just knows a lot of Mormons who have taught her a lot. And with her insight as a counselor, she's kind of attained some unique information. And I'll let her talk to you and introduce herself, but we just had a lot in common regarding spiritual warfare. And she is in a community of people who, absolutely see a lot of the same truths that we're seeing and noting in the world, with occultism, with false religion, and all that kind of ugly stuff. And, there's a community there's all different kinds of communities out there that see this stuff but are not Christian. And Jaymee and I have a lot in common as Christians, if you want to call us that, but we've also discussed how Christianity has kind of given some people a bad rap because of the religious spirit, because of religiosity and religion in general, corruption that's going on there. And in general, we have a similar outlook on spiritual warfare, how Christianity is become so tainted through the religious spirit. But there's, a whole slew of people out there who recognize the evil and the corruption that are going on in the world that are really good people. And so both of us have kind of been called as to bridge a gap between New Age or occultism, or just good people who, think that religion, well, not religion, we agree that religion's really no bueno at this point on the earth, but that, out in the world, there's so many different paths of spirituality that can be walked. And some people are just really good people and see the wickedness that's going on in the world. So we also kind of want to talk today about spiritual warfare, why it's important to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, what it is to do deliverance, to warfare, to take your case before the throne of God, and how, having a relationship with Jesus Christ is a lot more like going to court than it is going to church. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Jaymee and let her introduce herself and her background, and just kind of why she reached out to me and how we got connected through Sean. So go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I saw you on Sean's podcast, and I just instantly just thought, oh, this girl really gets it. She's really smart. She really understands the legal stuff, the spiritual warfare stuff. And I just really wanted to talk to you because I just got excited when I saw you. I was like, oh, she totally gets it, and she explains it so well. And I just would love to meet her and talk to her. And so my background is in counseling and kind of the secular psychology. And then I just sort of on my own started researching and having an interest in satanic ritual abuse. And, of course, there's the spiritual warfare aspect of that. And so I did most of my spiritual warfare training through the courses that were offered free by Russ Dizdar and his ministries through the Black. And so that's kind of where I really started to really like blend the two things together. And then really feeling that my role is to be like a bridge because, I can sort of see both sides because of my background. Like I can understand the psychology and the trauma and the physiology and the science and like that kind of secular training, which I think maybe some people miss. And then I can also really see, I've researched a lot of the demonology and the spiritual warfare and the legality of everything. And so I feel that I've sort of been involved in these sort of communities that seem like maybe they're opposed to each other. And I personally, I don't like, I can reconcile them and I can see how they fit together and how they've kind of been purposely inverted to seem like they're different, but they're actually not. And so I think a lot of times what people reject is what they don't understand. And so I feel like my role too is to kind of help bridge people's understanding of things so that they kind of understand that like it's not as dialectic as maybe things appear on the surface, that like there's a way to understand things and how they work together without them being opposed. And so when I saw your video, I could tell that you were actually kind of in that same sort of position trying to explain things to people. And yeah, it's always like a difficult to do because there's been so much programming against Christianity, and I'll say rightfully so, because there's so much horrible stuff out there. And I would never, like, of course I would completely understand why people think it's crazy and reject it because of the way it's presented and like all the stuff out there that's really actually illegitimate. And so you know, being able to explain things to people in a way where it makes sense really gives people the opportunity to like understand it and how it applies to them. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today because I think it's going to be an interesting show, just us discussing that. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. So why don't we talk a little bit about your background and understanding about just kind of SRA in general. I know I've shared my story, and so I don't know if those who follow me, how detailed their knowledge is about, you know, what SRA is, and maybe just share a little bit about SRA and why, you know, approaching the throne and deliverance is important in SRA in general.
Right. So it's always a little bit difficult to explain our story when people have no idea what it is. But the most simplest way for me to explain what satanic ritual abuse is it's a form of trauma-based mind control where there's a series of traumas that are done to children as they're developing in order for them to conclude on their own a series of core beliefs, which can then be exploited for a larger agenda. And so they'll put people through rituals, which are like psychodramas, which basically create false beliefs in the child, and then it frames the child's worldview, and then that all gets repressed into the subconscious. And so that's like a program that's running that individual, which is not really who they are. Because a lot of people have a hard time understanding like how so much evil is going on in the world. And if you understand satanic ritual abuse and the level that it's been done on a mass amount of people, unknowingly to themselves, then like how so many people are going along with these agendas of evil will start to make sense. And so for me personally, when I started to learn what SRA was, I felt like it was the most important thing I had ever learned about, and the most important thing that I needed to understand, and the most important thing that I needed to help other people realize existed, and also to understand, and then also to try and help the people that have been victimized by it, and to find like knowledge and solution and informations. Because I still believe to this day that the people that have been put through satanic ritual abuse are the key to freedom for so much of humanity, because they have so much knowledge that regular human beings in regular society don't have, and their memories and mind is compartmentalized from themselves. And if we can help these people to facilitate their own healing, then that's going to unlock this treasure chest of tools and knowledge that's going to help everybody. And so like I really believe that it's the most important place for us to put our effort in knowledge and in attempting to help the people that have been victims of this agenda.
Absolutely. And I agree, because you know they are basically the or is it the microcosm of the macrocosm? Is that how did I say it the right way?
Yeah.
Because everybody struggles in minute ways with things that they're going to be struggling with on a mass scale. And, you know, all of us go through different little variations of life, but they're going through it on, you know, this whole other level. And, you know, when they recover, they come out with, massive insider information as to the satanic kingdom and how it runs, the kingdom of darkness, false government, false religion. And they come out, yeah, with absolute massive healing techniques also to be able to recover these things. So I absolutely agree. But another thing that they come away with is spiritual gifts. And as much as it sucks what they've had to go through, because the interesting thing is that that is one of the reasons that sexual abuse, ritual abuse, sodomy, incest, that's the reason that it's all used, is because, like you said, it shatters the mind's eye open. And so it taps them into the spiritual realm in a way that most humans who just go into mainstream Christianity let a human being, the arm of the flesh, come between them and their heavenly, godly, spiritual relationship. They kind of shut that off. But these people in the background are secretly, continually, constantly working interdimensionally
Mm-hmm.
in the other realms that exist around us. And so Satanists believe in God more than a lot of people. Satanists know more about God than a lot of Christians know about God. It's just all inverted. And so they absolutely have so much to offer and teach us. And so then I'm curious, how you found, the most success in working with victims of that. Like what techniques and what systematic ways do you go about helping others that you feel like is the most productive to their trauma?
Yeah, I think that in our society, we kind of want everything to be mechanized and to just find, like whether it's, taking a pill or using this method, or, we see all this in the new age, like using affirmations, or, you always want these like techniques and methods that are going to be what's going to fix the problem or move us from A to B, and always having an agenda. We're just kind of talking before the interview about how, when you are counseling people from a Christian perspective, you really start to let go of those ideas and just become very, very receptive rather than active. And so for me, most of what I do with people is just praying with them and sitting in a space with them, being available for whatever work God wants to do, and then just dealing with everything as it comes. And then, of course, like when things come up, having the psychology background and trauma, it's, then you can deal with things as they come up. But I find a lot of with SRA, or trauma-based mind control, a lot of people that are counseling, they want to come in with like these techniques or methods or find the secret codes, or they want to get in like opening up the trunk of a car and just get in and fix it. And even a lot of survivors kind of come that way, like, oh yeah, I just want to like find my memories and get it all out and do my journaling and, fix it up and get going. And it's like, it's really, really hard to let go of the control of it, because it really is God that's going to undo it. And it really is being receptive and available for whatever God wants to do, and being present and willing to work with whatever God brings up for you, which is really opposite of what we're trained to do in our society. And being trained in secular counseling is the opposite of that as well. Right. So again, it's always really tailoring things to the individual. And I do think there's a lot of, like methods that can be, helpful, like whether it's like tapping or, deep relaxation, or anything that works with trauma is going to be helpful in working with people. But like, it's, to me, I think the main thing is building a relationship of trust and safety is number one, because that's kind of the main thing that keeps all the programming in place, is that these people have been betrayed so much in their life that they cannot actually connect with another human being enough to trust to even like be able to like disclose anything. Or and so for me, I always say love and safety really is, and it's going to be God working through you to give that, right? Because it's going to be what allows that amygdala to relax, and the kind of that feeling of safety is really what allows the brain to start unlocking, right? And it's that love and trust that's going to create safety. And so you see this happening on the main scale over the last couple of years, just keeping everybody in a state of not feeling safe. And like, that's very intentional to keep those parts of the brain segmented off. So for me, I think the most important thing is just human connection and love and acceptance is really, because like I said, I'm not doing anything. Like if people think they're going to go learn a bunch of techniques and go and be like a deprogrammer or whatever, like I just find you really need to humble yourself and let go of that and just make yourself available for the spirit to work through you, because it's not going to work the way that you want it to. If you're trying to force things at all, it's actually going to work in reverse.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to hear more from you in a second about why, your feelings on mainstream psychology. But for myself, like when I got on government assistance, well, and the judge, when I was going through custody stuff with my kids, they really wanted to see me in therapy because my ex-husband was, of course, claiming that I was crazy. And so they want, and I don't like mainstream therapy. I don't think it helps.
No.
It works. I've done it before. It was never effective. I've seen people go through it for years and have seen little success. I know it can help, but what I was always seeking more alternative type stuff through, definitely connecting with somebody who had a spiritual connection, and you can't get that in mainstream because they're not even allowed to talk about that stuff. But the one thing that I did find for myself that was really powerful, of course, God arranged this, is I went to some free services at a women's shelter and was given a therapist who was essentially like training. She was, still in school and just learning, very new. She was way younger than me. And, I'm thinking, what's this girl going to be able to do for me? She doesn't have kids. She's never been married. She doesn't know anything, I don't even know if she's spiritual or not. I mean, if she is, she's not going to tell me because they don't talk about that. But what God led me to there was she was in training currently for EMDR. And so we did, I opted to allow her. I was like one of the first people she practiced doing it on. And I wasn't worried about that because I knew that God was in control of my life and that he had his hand on my healing. And so she was the one that I went through like all of my childhood experiences of incest with. And, we listed them out and went through them and undid them. And it was amazing to me because every time we would release something and be going through the script or whatever, my safe place, and she would do her fingers and I would follow her fingers with my eyes. I felt like it coming out and I would yawn. And it was crazy because the very last time I was there, I yawned like 50 times or more in that one session. I was just yawning like crazy. And it's funny, every time I talk about this, it makes me yawn even to think about it. Like I can't even finish the sentence because, and it's interesting because even though within Christianity, we're taught like about all the new age practices and how wicked and evil there were things that I did learn in my energy healing and new age practices that there's legitimacy to. And there's some kind of channel that runs from the mouth, down through the energy systems in the body, down to the opening on the other end. And it has some kind of name. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a C.
Sahara?
I don't even know if I would know it if you said it. I only read it one time in a book and I was like, that's what that is. But it's, and I've been in tune with it before too, when I was being tormented with demons, when I went on some hormones at one point in my life. And hormones, I realized God allowed me to have this hormone experience that I share in another video that I did recently, to understand that messing with our hormones is really dangerous because they're our spiritual balance. They're incredibly spiritual. And the only time I've ever felt like maybe I might be possessed was when I went through some hormone therapy. And I couldn't take them for 2 weeks because I got really sick and I just forgot, and I was in bed and I couldn't do anything and didn't have anybody to take care of me. So my hormones got really messed up and I literally could hear like demonic voices in my head. So I understand the reality of how that messes you up. But, so there's what I was saying is when I was going through that period, I was doing like a deliverance and a prayer thing one day. And I literally saw like thousands of demons like channeling through this channel in my body. And so when I opened up my mouth to yawn, when she would do this, the window to my soul, it's like those spirits are like coming out of my mouth, or those memories or energies or whatever it was, I
Mhm.
had a physical reaction to it. And so, if like, that's what I always tell people, if for some reason they're in mainstream therapy and that's all they have, ask for EMDR or find somebody who does that, because just your typical whatever isn't necessarily the way, especially if it's somebody who's not open to um, deliverance or something spiritual. But I want you to share your take on, kind of mainstream psychology and what you think and feel about all of that.
Yeah, this is something I've had to really give a lot of thought to because of just my own training, and then just my own stuff that I had to learn and unlearn, and then also really, praying about it and sitting with it, because so many things are such a fine line. And you have kind of these Christians that are like, everything new age is a cult, and like you can't even know what the chakras are, and I don't really fall in that camp, because I do like, I realize these things are real, and like pretending they're not is not knowledge that's going to benefit you. But every single thing that is in the new age is something that is based on something from God that's been taken and twisted and exploited, right? And so it's always a very fine line, because all of these things can be used for good or evil. And I think that kind of going really far on the fence either way is not really the most effective, because there is so much benefit and healing to like understanding things, especially when you're getting out of the conscious mind and accessing the subconscious through the body. And if you research what SRA is, it's like that's what they're doing. So if you want to be ignorant of that and then think that you're just going to heal through talk therapy, well, that's exactly what they want, right? They don't want you to go in and understand that like your memories are in your cells and in your body, and that you can access the subconscious mind through your body and through things like EMDR and different methods of energy work and stuff like that. And trauma, a lot of trauma healing is going to have that physical body component, because the subconscious mind is in the cells of the body, right? And so that's how they put a lot of programs in, like with somatics and NLP and all this stuff, or like hypnosis. But on the other side of that, sorry,
What's MLP?
neuro linguistic programming, like
MLP.
stuff like that, right? And so I've taken all of this training. However, I don't you normally use it. Like I took it just to understand how it's been used against us. Like I don't hypnotize people, because I do feel that it's can be like, you're on a very dangerous ground, right? Like if you're doing that stuff. And so again, I think going back to just working with Holy Spirit to like whatever's coming up, instead of going in and trying to like hypnotize somebody and get into their mind and dig around. I think that's the opposite of how God wants us to be in a relationship with him for healing. Is like him, if he wants something to be brought up, he'll bring it up, right? But then there's also that act of the will, where you need to have the courage and be available and like let God know, like I'm willing to see the truth, like I'm willing to have the courage to like asking for to be shown things, and available to, and being willing to deal with whatever's shown, right? Like, so it's kind of just a different attitude in these things than saying like they're all good or bad or evil, right? But for me, like I had so many books, and then I realized a lot of what I learned in school actually was like really satanic. And if you even look at the American Psychological Association, it's like a pitchfork, is or the hypnosis or the Dental Association or anything, like it's all in their symbols. Like it's like it's kind of like very dangerous waters, but like I think you still have to go through the water sometimes to find the gold, because it is in there, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And so touch a little more on like mainstream psychology and dentistry. Like, how are they used satanically? Like, specifically, do you know? Well, because I know, personally, I know that the whole the whole field of psychology, especially in the hospitals, has been infiltrated with Hulk active, Coven active, bloodline people
Yep.
who are sent within those systems to work in order to keep people programmed. They pretend like they're helping you, but they're not. I mean, when I was in
Mhm.
the ER and they put me in the psych ward, the doctor who came into my room, she didn't talk to me one time. I mean, like interact with me as far as therapy or ask me anything about how I'm doing or anything like that. And her eyes, she was on something because her pupils were massive, like, and she just looked like a zombie, like she was zoned out. And she wrote in my file, just on one page of 25 pages of notes of me being in the hospital, locked in a bedroom for 7 days that they wouldn't let me out of. Up in the corner, it said schizophrenia. And it just was written there. It just said schizophrenia. It said diagnosis schizophrenia. There was nothing in the entire chart anywhere that said that they had done tests, that they had talked to me, the reason why they found this, diagnostics, nothing. It was just, and that I've never been diagnosed with such a thing. And she never even engaged with me for longer than 5 to 10 minutes. And most of our conversation was me saying, am I leaving today? Am I leaving? Are you letting me out? What's going on? And to the point where they even told me that one of the nurses had reported that I had been seeing gray aliens. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Who was that? What's their name? And they wouldn't tell me. And, it's fascinating because on the back of the doors, on the slats, they actually, like these wood slats that, within wood grain, how you can find images, they had intentionally implanted into the images gray aliens. And I noticed them on the door the first night that I was there. I never said anything because I was the wiser to know exactly what was going on. I didn't say anything, but because they put me in that room and because they were on the door, they just wrote it in my charts. Oh, she said she can't be discharged because she said she's seeing gray aliens, which is hilarious. I just laughed in her face and asked for the name and they wouldn't give it to me. But, and then I know that dentists, I'm finding more and more out about how dentists are being used in these programs. So what do you know about all of that and how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think every town, every town has a Mason Hall, and I'm pretty sure every town, the hospital is owned by the cult. Like, that's the one place that they need to take over in order to function as a cult, because they need to be able to lock people up. They need to be able to have access to drugs. They need to be able to cover up crimes. They need to be able, I don't believe that a cult can actually function in any town or city unless they have pretty much complete control over the hospital system. Like, I think that's the one thing in every town that they want to own, for a number of reasons. But speaking about psychiatry and psychology in particular, if you look at it, it's the same as the birthing process, right? Like, everything's actually done the exact opposite of how it would help you. And so, even the idea of a psych ward, like, why would you take traumatized people and, like you said, these, when people have trauma, they get these empathic skills and psychic ability and stuff that above and beyond what a normal brain would be. And they know this, right? So why would you put a bunch of empathic people that are traumatized in a room together that are all going to feed off each other's energy and pick up on it all and re-traumatize each other just by being in the vicinity of that many traumatized people? That in itself is just reactivating the trauma that a person's going through, right? And then taking away a person's sense of autonomy, taking away their cell phone, making them wear a gown. All of these things are to psychologically traumatize a person who's coming in for help because they're in a traumatic episode or state or whatever, right? And then just the whole way that it's set up, that's just the psych ward. But if you're talking about even just therapy, and I'm not saying that there's no benefit to therapy. My personal opinion is the benefit of therapy. I think it's good to say things outside of yourself once because it needs to get out of you. And I think that breaking that seal of holding everything inside, I believe there's actually a huge benefit to getting it outside and having somebody else listen to it. And then also being with a counselor, just building the relationship of trust and having somebody witness your story and actually just have compassion and hold space for you. I do believe there's a benefit to that. One time, that's a process that happens once and you go through it. So but when they're saying, oh, just keep coming for therapy for weeks for 20 years, it's okay, that obviously that's not actually moving anything from point A to point B. So I do believe there's a place for it, but unless you're doing the other things with it, which is going to be spiritual, healing in the spirit, and then also the physical, hitting the physical body, right? Which is going to be stuff like the EMDR, even just massage or extra, all of these things are going to go with it. That's going to have the benefit of actually changing things. But what they recommend in the hospital system is like medications, right? Which is just suppressing symptoms, that so nothing's never actually being processed, like it's staying trapped, right? And then that the endless talk therapy, right? And like I've worked in a lot of like recovery centers and stuff like that, and it's like it's a revolving door, right? So I mean, to me, that's just enough evidence right there. There's the odd person that if they're doing their own work, they can use that as a stepping stone. I'm not saying it's bad, especially if you've never been to that and you don't have like basic knowledge. Like a lot of people that come in to a treatment center, they've come from a traumatic childhood or background. No one's ever taught them about boundaries. No one's ever taught them about basic psychology or how your brain works, or like these tools that, for somebody that's never been taught this, for them to come in and have this kind of experience of learning all these tools, if they intrinsically in themselves want to take that and use it and go beyond, it can be helpful, right? But when they start getting dependent on this care and help, it becomes like a codependent relationship with the caretakers, and like it's a revolving door, and it's actually just a huge money maker. And so like I really I'm really actually moving more and more away from it. The older I get in life, the more I like in good conscience really don't actually want to participate in any parts of it. I still do to a degree, but it's like, especially now, it's just getting so blatantly satanic that like it's I don't even think I want really anything to do with it actually at this point. Like,
Well, and those medications too, a lot of them, well, most of them, frankly, are on the list of used for programming and to make you forget memories. And like I have a friend that I just watched, a few friends that I've helped get off of their medications, and it's amazing to see shortly after they come off of years and years of being on medications, antidepressants or even just basic anti-anxiety stuff like that, that they suddenly start seeing their life clearly, understanding people, oh, that person hates me and is my enemy, and I should not be like just having a nice, kind relationship with this person for the past 20 years. Oh, this person actually really tried to harm me. It numbs you to a lot of that stuff intentionally. And that's why a lot of these medications are satanic, because literally they are created by Satanists in order to dumb down and numb the spirit so that you can't fight the fight in the courtroom that you're supposed to be fighting before God. And, another thing is that you talked about codependency, on a therapist, and that, the Bible talks about not to rely on the arm of the flesh. It even says, trust not in a friend or a counselor. And that's because that's Jesus's place. And, it's fascinating that the tree of knowledge of good and evil that we were forbidden to partake of, that we still partake of daily, the older I get and the more I go through, hell on earth and a lot of the things that I've been through, the more I realize what the tree of knowledge of good and evil is, and why it is evil, and why we were not supposed to partake of it, and how much more simple it is if we partake of the fruit of the tree of life and just live in Christ. Because there's so much that we do not need to know that is unnecessary knowledge. All of the sciences and the functionalities of our body and our mind and our heart and our spirit and the chakras and all that stuff. Like there's yeah, at this point in the world, like some of that stuff is useful to know because of how far we've come and gotten away from the basicness of the simple, plain truths of the fruit of the tree of life. But the more I just trust in God and work through Jesus Christ, the less I need to know any of that stuff, because it just happens. Like it just happens in the background. What happens when we go into science and we go into meds and we go into energy work and all that stuff is it's like striving, and we're striving to be God. We're striving to play God. We're striving to have a handle and a control on all these things in our body and in our system that just fall into place when we apply the blood of Jesus. It just happens and naturally, and that's what grace and mercy is. And so that's why it's just so much more powerful to go before the throne, plead with the Father, ask for knowing how to use the courts of God as a legal system, and knowing that he's just going to fight your battles for you, you know?
Mhm.
And it's interesting because just recently I had a dream, and without going into all the details of it, the main part kind of that I want to touch on is that there was these big clouds in the sky, and there was four of them, and they were huge, and they looked like big storm clouds, but they were kind of oval, and they were separate, like in like four different storm systems in the sky right next to each other. I was looking out this window, and then I had in my mind a picture of just these little tiny pink toys, and there was four of them, and they were kind of a similar shape, almost like they were almost like a little pink pig. They weren't, but that was kind of what they were, a caricature or a formation in my mind. And what I understood when I was translating the dream was that these four cloud things in the sky were symbols of these things that were in this picture in my mind, kind of subconscious. They just look like these little toys, these little pink pigs, but they were representative of the same thing. And so all of a sudden these clouds started taking shape, and they started to look like a beast, a big, huge, they developed teeth and horns and different things. Each one of them looked different. And I started feeling afraid and realizing I needed to get out of there because they were going to start coming towards me. A storm was coming. And so I ran down into the basement and tried to take off and get away. And one of these clouds came into the house and through the house and down the stairs. You know, it was a cloud. It could move through the doorways. And it came down, and it was almost like chasing me. But it didn't have a face, and it didn't really have consciousness. It was almost like this big, dumb, weird thing. But it was a beast. And the basement was unfinished. And so I'm down there, and what I realized when I'm going through, you know, the interpretation of my dream was that these big clouds and this beast that was coming for me, they were actually memories from my childhood. And when I was little, they just looked like these little pink toys. But now that I'm ready to understand them, God's showing me they're going to look like a big, fat, ugly beast coming for you, you know? And so, I've never had therapy. I've never tried to do anything to recover memories, but as I go and as I trust in my spiritual gifts, and as I just strengthen my relationship with Jesus Christ and go before the throne, those things just come to me. And, you know, I just start getting little pieces. Like one day I was talking to my friend, and I had this memory pop into my mind, and it's almost like infancy or toddlerhood. I'm not sure. I was just a tiny little thing laying on the floor. And my mom had said we were going to go visiting teaching, which is a Mormon thing that they do. The women are assigned to other, you know, women in the church to go and visit them. So we were going to go visiting teaching, and we were at this family's house in my ward. And the boy was he's been one of my friends for years. And I believe now, I think he was one of the ones in the neighborhood that was highly trained to sexualize other children. But, you know, we were that small, and I had this memory of being taken there, and I didn't even see the details. I just knew that I was taken and laid on the floor in a circle of witches, and that they were teaching us as infants how to do sexual things together, you know? And, I didn't have to look for that or seek for that. I didn't ask. I had no idea that that was a part of my infancy or toddlerhood. And it just came. And I wouldn't have ever even have thought or sought for that, you know? So that's just kind of one example to show how and why, you know, the seeking, like you're saying, that digging isn't necessary, because it does come when we just enter into that relationship.
Yeah, it's kind of like just another level of the inversion. Like, I don't know, our world is so inverted. I think people get a lot of the really obvious inversions, but there's just, it's, everything's inverted down to like just the most subtlest level of like, you know, we're conditioned to believe like it's a good thing to go and change things around and make them better, and you know what I mean? And like it's actually, that's another inversion, right, of being receptive and like letting go of micromanaging. And like a lot of counseling techniques, you know, is really just kind of like it's kind of fake. Like it pumps up, like you might feel good if you keep doing the methods, or like, you'll have like these little techniques for like dealing with like thoughts or feelings, or like, you know what I mean? But it's not really healing things at the root, like where, like God would do it like cybernetically, like he would change something that would like change everything else without you even having to go and micromanage it all. Whereas if you're using all these techniques, it's like, it's a lot of work, right? Like it's exhausting, like doing therapy, or like all the new age stuff. Like, it's like, you got to do all this stuff all the time, and all your affirmations and all your body work and all your journal. And like, it's like this huge thing. And like, you're really, it's just like going to fill all your time. Like, it's going to be like this full-time job of you trying to keep yourself in this pumped up, state of, feeling okay. Right. Whereas if you like just let go and and I'm not saying it's like being completely passive, like there has to be that act of willingness and like willing to be receptive and willing to deal with what's coming up. But like, it's such a relief to just let that go, right? And like realize that you were just conditioned to believe that you had to do all this yourself, and that you had this huge burden and responsibility to like have to go in and fix all these things, when like you actually don't. And like, that's what I think a lot of people kind of, I feel like a lot of my life's trying to explain like the Christianity to people, because a lot of barriers for people is that they don't really understand God. And so they think God's mean, or like, they don't really get the way that things work. Because if they really understood the way things work, like they would understand that God loves us and that he's trying to give us freedom, and that like any rules or parameters is actually for a benefit to be able to give us freedom, and that he actually wants to help and heal us. Like if we would like let go of our micromanaging, and like, so all these responsibilities that we think we have are like an illusion and a lie. And like, there's so much like available if you understood how it works, and like be willing to receive it. Like it's completely different than what we've been trained to believe that things work. Like, I don't know if that makes sense to kind of explain it that way.
Well,
But
yeah, because I mean, it does say in the Bible, and of course, it's not exact, but the way I understand it, is if we're not serving God through Jesus Christ, then we are a slave to Satan, and it's just the way it is. And the method that we've been given to do that through is through the courts of heaven, and through keeping his laws and obedience. And I think one way to kind of help people understand, because a lot of people look at the Bible, and the main hang up that I hear about people with the Bible is legalism, and then also about the God of the Old Testament who was angry and destroyed people, and they don't understand it. But I think it's super important to help people understand the God of the Bible in that time, and why he was doing that, and how it is legalistic, and why he is a God of justice because of that, and why things play out in our lives hellishly in the way they do when we have iniquity, the sins of our fathers, on our bloodline. And when we don't live within those parameters of safety that our creator, our father, gave to us in order for the God of this world to not have legal right over us. And so, when the Nephilim, the fallen angels, came down and laid with man and created another hybrid being on the earth that wasn't supposed to be, that wasn't God's creation. They left their first estate. They had an appointed job as an angel to do for God, and they left it, and they lusted after women who were human women, who were the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve that God created and put on the earth. And they came down and created a bloodline of children that were unnatural, that were massive, that ended up giants. And they literally started trying, well, they had eaten all the fields of, wheat and whatever, and they were worshipped because they were huge. And then they started cannibalizing people, and they're infatuated with incest because they're angels, and because they left God's will, they left his grace and mercy and his blessing. So now they aren't connected to God, and they're these powerful beings who had angelic powers, and they give these powers down to the bloodlines of humanity, and humanity starts making deals with them and entering into covenants with them and worshiping them as gods. And then that's where all of these, what we see today in modern humanity, in occult rituals, SRA stuff, cannibalism. That stuff was all taught clear back from the whole reason that the earth was flooded in the first place during Noah's time. And it says in the Bible that in the last days, that in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, that it would be as it was in the days of Noah, which means that the human genome, our DNA, would be so polluted with this second incursion of the Nephilim that we're, you know, infested with these demonic ways again. And so the God of the Old Testament, the whole reason he was sending the Israelites to destroy these people, which after Jesus Christ and when he came and taught love, he doesn't work like that anymore. His people aren't assigned anymore to destroy. God told me this, and it is biblical too. The wicked destroy the wicked. He's not sending the righteous to destroy the wicked anymore. But in the Old Testament, that was how he served justice on vile, wicked humans. So people will go, oh, he destroyed this entire tribe. Well, do you know who that tribe's God was? Do you know what that tribe's God required of them? Do you know that tribe would rape their babies from infancy, that tribe was eating the flesh of their own children, and so this God who would serve justice legalistically to these tribes of humanity who were vile, wicked, had a reason for it. Do you think they deserve to live? Like, they're so corrupt, so many generations in. It says in the Bible that the sins of the fathers are iniquities passed down to the third and fourth generation. How many generations out do you have to go before these people are birthing people, eating their own children, eating other people's children, drinking their blood, having sex with whoever they want, and now having sex with animals and making, animals, and then people are like, oh, God is just mean. And it's like, if you met these people, if you knew these people, who they hide really well now, these beings are still here. They just hide and go underground now. But you would be in love with the God of justice, who it will destroy these wicked so that they don't cannibalize and ritualize and incestuously continue out in the iniquity of their fathers. So that's one thing that I feel, is really important for people to understand about the God of the Old Testament and why he's just and how he works in the justice system, because, we're not supposed to have the, what is it called when somebody gets killed for killing someone in the law, in man's way? What is that called? The death penalty, the death penalty. That's not our job to issue the death penalty. That's God's. And God does it through. That's why King David, served the death penalty, but that man was going to die anyways. He was going to war, and he wouldn't go back to his wife when David told him to. He didn't obey the king. He would have died anyway. The only reason David got in trouble for sending him to the front line was because he got in the way of God. God, he was already going to war. He likely would have died not on the front lines. So when we get in the way and play God, that's always where an issue comes in, and you start taking people's lives and messing with people's children. And, that's when God intervenes, and that's the God people don't understand, because those tribes were horrific and worshipful. They didn't just not love Yahweh, so he was just jealous because he was like, well, I'm your God, don't worship them, worship me. You have to understand who those gods are, and like I said, what they required: blood, incest, flesh. These were the same things that these people were involved in. So that's just kind of one of my takes on the God of justice that I worship and love, and get excited about his justice being served to people who will not repent and are into all of that stuff still.
Well, it's a lot of times people take things out of context because we're not omniscient. And as a human, we see things only from our own ego, right? And so I always think of, how much does a little 2-year-old think their parent's the meanest person in the world if they take something out of their hand that they wanted to chew on? Well, maybe it was something poisonous, right? But to that 2-year-old, their parent is the meanest person ever, right? And that's how people kind of look at the God of the Old Testament when they're not putting everything in context. Or imagine if you, didn't know anything about the hospital or something, and you walked into a room and somebody was cutting somebody's leg off, and you were like, oh, like, what are you doing? And you know, grabbed the knife out of their hand and whatever, but like really maybe that leg needed to be amputated for that person to live. But like, if you're not looking at something in context, it appears to be something other than it is. And like, if you read the Old Testament, like it's all a foreshadowing of what's going to happen. And people don't like it because it's harsh, but it's like, who are you to say it shouldn't be hard? Like, we're talking about our eternal souls here. So like, if some stuff needs to go down for stuff to happen, like, who are you to say it's like harsh, or, you know, like, is everything supposed to be all nice, right? Like, it's, we're living in a harsh, like, there's something harsh going on that we're a part of, right? Like, it's just because you don't like it or understand it doesn't mean that it's not righteous in the holistic picture of what God's actually trying to do in the whole story, right? And also another thing is like, think about how ignorant the people were in the Old Testament. Like, it would be like us going and like trying to deal with like the most ignorant people ever. Like, God needed to do really harsh stuff for them to even get like a concept of like what even like a sacrifice is, or like what an atonement is, or like, so if you look at all the things that are going on in the Old Testament, it's like he's doing these psychodramas to like people that have no concept even of these constructs. Like, he has to do certain things for them to even like internalize a construct, right? Like, and it's all foreshadowing, because it's like starting out like dealing with really, but then you see people evolving over time where he doesn't need to be doing those things because they already have the concept of what those things are, right? So if you look at the end, looking back from the beginning, it looks really harsh. But if you're like, okay, but I see how it all goes in a foreshadowing and a line, and then like where it's going in the future, it actually, in context, it's not, right? And so that's another way that, you know, people can kind of try to reframe like how they're judging things from a limited view, right?
Mm-hmm. So talk to me about how you see, you know, the way, following Jesus Christ, living that path, what that looks like in a legalistic way, and why, you know, understanding spiritual warfare in the courts of heaven is important for anyone, not just SRA people, but, you know, in general.
Yeah, I mean, I try to explain this to people like in the really kind of simple way, because like I feel like a lot of people see a lot of like weird church culture stuff, but I mean, humans have made up all kinds of weird things based on the Bible, like that is humans making stuff up, right? And then people look at that stuff from the outside and think, oh, this stuff's all crazy. Like, look at these people like dancing around and like doing all this weird stuff. And I always say, like, you know, that's humans taking their take on things and doing a human thing based on what they interpret something as. Like, it's like, to me, when I look at the Bible, it's like, it's a law, and it's legal, and it's like, so I think people can understand the analogy of a video game. Like, now that we have everything kind of computerized, or like people can think of things like a matrix that has like binary code and stuff, right? So if you think of like, yes, we are in a type of construct in the third dimension, which is a physical representation of many different like spiritual dimensions. This is the 3D representation of that going on. There's actual code. And like, this is God's game. Okay. Like, he wrote the code, and the code is code. Like, and the reason I say that is because when like I took a tech course, and it was a little bit weird for me because there's no cheating in technology. Like, it's binary. It's either it works, it doesn't work. You can't kind of like wing it. The code just doesn't line up. Like, it's math, right? And so God's universe is that way too. Like, he put code in, it's math. It doesn't, you can't bend it. Like, you can try, but it's like God put a program with code, and he's the coder, and it's his game. And humans can try all this stuff to try to bypass past the code, but it's just you telling yourself that you can't change the code because you're not God. And I try to explain it that way to people, and that's kind of how the law works and spiritual warfare works, because you know, Satan understands like that he can manipulate us by us having ignorance of how the code works, right? And so that's why he works through deception and through lies, and then we do things of our own free will, right? And so starting to really wrap your head around like understanding that we're in a construct with code, and that we don't have the power to bend the code. Like, we are not God. We can't change the code. So if you don't educate yourself on how this game works, then you are going to get your butt kicked. And like, a lot of people get their butt kicked, and then they think, oh well, God's a jerk because I had good intentions and I didn't know, and I was trying to do things, and God should have stopped bad things from happening to me if he loved me. And what people don't understand about God is that God is not a liar. He can't go against himself. He doesn't break his own code, because then he's a liar, and God is not a liar. And so he actually is trying to give us freedom and free will, and gives us the parameters to do that, because he does love that. But like, he can't come in and save us from the own consequences of our decisions, because then he's a liar and he's bending his own code, which would make him like Satan. And so it's like, people think God's a jerk, but it's like, no, he's a solid person. Like, he's not going to break his own code or go back on it. So like, but having said that, he had to set up parameters for this construct to work. And people have all these different ideas about Jesus and stuff, but like, really, Jesus was a way for God to actually allow us forgiveness, because otherwise God would have to break his own code. So the only way that he could make kind of an out to be able to forgive us is to like come as himself, to like be able to have a legal construct for us to not have to have the consequence of every single thing automatically, like an automated game, right? And so, but that's the way that God could do it, and still keeping with his word and being solid and not changing and not going against himself. So like, if people can kind of understand that, then you can see that God's actually not a jerk. He actually loves you. He's actually trying to give you freedom, but he's also not going to become a liar in order to protect you from the consequence of your own free will decisions. And he doesn't want to take our free will. Satan wants to take our free will, but he's always trying to offer it as freedom. But there is no freedom in Satan. He's offering you a false freedom to basically go and make a trap for yourself. You're free to go make a trap that he's going to come in and have a legal right to give consequences to you for. So I think people start to think of things more like that, then you're in a more empowered place to understand like how you can actually navigate this with knowledge.
So when somebody says like, well, it doesn't hurt anybody else, it can't, why would it be against any law for me to go out and, use my own body to just make love with somebody that I love, even if I'm not married to them, whether they be male or female, or whether we be married or not, why can't I do that? I'm not hurting anyone.
Right. That's a perfect example. And I'm actually going to be doing a show in 2 weeks just about how much sexuality is such a part of all of this. And we see this right now playing out on the stage, like with, everything to do with Satanism, or sorry, there's such a sexual element to everything, right? It's like sex is one of the main tools that's being inverted, exploited, and like one of the main ways to basically mess with humanity is through sexuality. And like now, it's with the children, and it's like, it's so key to everything is human sexuality. And so, God created sex. Like, God created sex for humans to enjoy within a construct that he created for a purpose, and it's in a context, right? And so a lot of what the Satanists do to promote the freedom is to take sex out of context. So it's like, it's deconstructing it from having an like actual spiritual sex would be within a construct of a marriage, because it's a safety construct to have the like emotional component, the spiritual component, the safety component, like the bonding component, like all these things that work together synergistically and in a whole like thing that works together in something good, right? But when you take out elements of it, it's out of context. And so that's what the Satanists are always promoting, right? Like just hooking up, or meaningless sex, or really mechanical sex with no emotion, or like, all the pornography and stuff. It's always taking everything out of a context and taking it down to its component parts instead of having it within a holistic framework. And so people say, well, like, why couldn't I do that? Or why can I do this? It's like, yeah, you can do that, but there's going to be a consequence to it that you're not going to understand, again, because you're not omniscient. You're not seeing things in the bigger context. And we're always sold a lie that like, oh, it's great. And like, you see people kind of do this, like people will go through stages in their life where they're really promiscuous or whatever. And then they actually get to a point where they start to understand why it's not good. Right. Like, but they if you told them that in the beginning, they probably wouldn't get it because everything always looks shiny in the storefront, right? Like, and so they're always like promoting that, but it's actually not good for people, and it's not good for our culture. It's not good for our spirits. It's not good, because then there's all these kind of social engineering things that go with it that they use sexuality for. And then now, like, everybody's just single, not married, not raising their kids, and watching porn. And like, how is that good for humanity, right? So we see the actual context of taking sex, or the consequence of taking sex out of a context. But like, people just, I don't know, maybe don't want to see that, but like, I mean, it's pretty obvious right now. This is the consequence. Like, look at the society we live in, right? Like, look what they're doing to children in schools. Like, it's like, this is the consequence of what happens. And God knew that, and he gave parameters for it, but people didn't want to listen. So now we can see, is this what we want? Who is this benefiting now, except for the Satanists that want to enslave us all? And the people making pornography are maybe making money, but I mean, is anyone else benefiting from this sexual liberation?
Yeah. Well, and that's where, people end up having to then justify so many other things that happen because of the consequences of those sexual ramifications. Like, for instance, a lot of the mothers that I work with who maybe even Christians who didn't understand how to choose a godly spouse, and consequence of, even like for me, I did get married. I did have children in the context of marriage. I mean, of course, I've had sex outside of the context of marriage and still didn't understand the consequences of that until down the road. But, in the context of having sex outside of marriage, a loving marriage, there are women all over who end up marrying into maybe a bloodline family. These men are seeking a seed of, a lot of times and they specifically seek out a Christian woman for whatever reason, different variations of reasons. They want maybe the spiritual gifts on her bloodline or whatever, and even if you get married, you end up with a child that you're bound to this person by for the rest of your lives, who literally married you and wanted your seed in order to torment you. And this is much more common than people would believe or understand. And then you try to go out and fix it, and you don't realize that now I have these two little girls at home. And, well, not fix that, but you go out and you get divorced and you try to go find a better situation. And now you end up, with somebody else who you still don't know how to receive revelation. Maybe you're having sex outside of marriage. And now this person who you think is totally in love with you and puts up this really beautiful front is now molesting your two girls that are at home. And you still don't know how to find a godly relationship because you don't know how to hear from Holy Spirit. And then, just as a teenager, if you're having sex outside of marriage and then you end up with a child, teenagers don't know, like, teenagers know that they have the consequence of a possible child, but now it's like, well, you can just get an abortion. Sex outside of marriage, if you aren't careful, it can lead you to the sin of murder. And people go, well, that's not murder. And I think that's interesting because I've seen this really great video lately where it shows, even though I personally don't agree with, I don't know how to say that. It's happened several times, but I personally have not seen a situation where somebody's used, what's it called? Artificial insemination, and it's ended up in the long run well, because usually God closes the womb for a reason. Maybe you don't know who you're married to, and it's not going to end up very well. But when they go in and a teenager is having sex and they end up with a child that they have to care for the rest of their life with somebody who's horrifically wicked, or not, or just a child who's fatherless, you really don't understand the ramifications of that until years down the road. And, in the Pride movement, most of what we see are people who don't have kids, who don't understand the ramifications of what that's going to do to your family in the long run, and how destructive, all of these perversions of our family unit end up in the long run. And then, one of the most obvious consequences of sex outside of marriage is STDs. And, I learned and saw how God uses that to, that's supposed to be a warning. Like, there's literally the physical consequence of the spiritual sin of having sex with somebody else outside of marriage, which is a sin against yourself, because you don't realize when you come together, when you know somebody and you come together with their soul, there you literally take on all of their stuff, their junk, their demons, those are now shared. And you take that on, and I've heard a lot of teenagers who have had sex outside of marriage and they're immediately suicidal right after and don't understand why, because you don't understand what just came into your house and home. And then you end up with an STD and you don't know why. And those are consequences. Those are warnings to say, this is going to hurt you. I'm going to show you that this is going to hurt you in the physical, because it's hurting you spiritually in a way you can't even comprehend. And the thing that I find fascinating is how many people are advocates for. I knew when I was in the indigenous Wiccan kind of new age medicine communities, that a lot of these polyamorous people, they push these open relationships, but they don't talk too often about how they're carrying STDs, and they can't even have these open sex relationships outside of when they're not having an inflamed time of month, and they just live with these consequences and never learn, because we've just been taught, oh, this is how it is. And these are part of those ramifications that when you fall outside of the laws of God, these things are supposed to be these warning signs and these markers to tell us, I'm not walking, the straight and narrow path. Wide is the way and broad is the path that leads to destruction. And you're in the process of destroying yourself. And we just ignore these, consequences all over the place.
Yeah, I think people really don't understand, like, the whole Bible is a marriage story, and the marriages are like the whole concept of what a marriage is. Like, it's like, and there's of course the secular government marriage that we have today that, doesn't normally work, and divorce lawyers make a lot of money because it's like, but if you think about what an actual spiritual marriage is, and like, the consequence of that, like you said, even just the transfer, like it is, you are becoming one flesh, and like there is an actual like transfer of like many things and a bonding of many things. And so the Satanists know this, right? Like, that's why they do so many marriage rituals. That's why they do so much rape. That's why they do so much, like, it's all for connecting things and for transferring things. And like, and so when it's been done on a global scale, it's also to break bonding, right? And so when they just take everything out of context, and sex is no longer meant to be like a bonding thing for bonding, like, it's, our whole society is atomized, right? And anomic, and like not connected and not bonded, and like everyone has attachment disorders, and like the Satanists love that. They love inverting that. It's one of the easiest, most effective ways. Like I said, like the sexual element of everything going on is so key to everything. And like, in my background, like, I was really trained that like sex is just like a medical thing. Like, there's no, you have to override any moral ideas you have about it. Like, it's just, it's just a medical thing. And like, you just have to teach people safety and like, how to use birth control. And I've worked in organizations like that, like through hospitals and harm reduction and stuff. And like, and that's what I was taught in school, like, to just, there's no judgment, there's no morals about it. It's just, like, it's just biological. And like, that's really how they train people, in social work, and like, that's really like the last way that we should look at sex, because there's such a spiritual, emotional bonding element to it that is like one of the things that Satanists exploit the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about when it comes to gay and trans issues? Talk a little bit about that and where that plays into God's laws. Legalism or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever.
It's an inversion, right? It's an inversion. And a lot of people, like, again, they'll use your virtue against you, and they'll try to make you seem like you're hateful and judgeful, and you're mean because you don't want to support people who are there and stuff. And like, I actually don't feel that way towards those people at all. Like, I actually feel a lot of empathy, because I realize they've been inverted, and like, I almost want to think of it, and I almost don't even want to call them trans anymore, because trans means like transcending or above or beyond, or like, not in the dialect anymore. It's like the thesis of them, right? And that, I think, is in that language is really incorrect. Like, I just want to call them gender inverted, because it is an inversion. And the people that are in it are deceived and inverted. And like, I mean, I don't hate them for that. Like, I really don't. I really, like, it could have been me. Like, it could have been anyone. It could happen to anybody, right? If the right things happen to them at the right times, that can be the consequence. And but there's such a campaign to make it seem like if anybody says anything about it, that you're being hateful. And it's, it's not God's plan. Like, God made man and woman, and he made them to go together in a certain way, in a certain context, for a certain purpose. And, they're promoting that inversion so heavily because it is an inversion of the way that God set things up.
Well, you know what confused me a lot for a lot of years was an experience that I had when I was 17 years old working in the emergency room. And I've prayed a lot about it for God to give me understanding over the years, because I literally had to just like put it all on the shelf for years of my life. Because so when I worked in the ER, they called me the calf queen. I was a EMT, and I just, did whatever they needed me to do. Didn't necessarily like take my own patients unless it was just like cuts and things like that. I could help with sutures and stuff. But, so I was called into this room to do a catheter, and they just needed a sample of urine. And they said, male cath in room 11. So I went and got the male cath kit and went in there and, started talking to the patient, and took off their thing and started getting the sheet and got the kit ready. And I went over to put the catheter in, because, oh, by the way, I just have to say, the reason they called me Queen Cath is because I just was really good at doing women's catheters. They're kind of hard because you have a couple holes going on, and I was just always a first shot. Because you have to throw away the kit if you go in the wrong hole and start over because it's sterile. So anyway, so I went in and I set everything up, and I took the sheet off, and I was like shocked when I pulled the sheet off, because they had told me a male catheter and it was a female. I mean, there was no penis there, so I was like, and I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And I thought, okay, is this transvestite? What's going on? So I went and said, oh, hold on, I forgot something. And I wrapped it up and, nonchalantly left the room and went out to the charge nurse. And I said, what's going on? You said it was a male cath in this room. And she's like, oh, you've never had this patient. They come in like once a month. She's like, they're actually a hermaphrodite. And so they have both parts, but they present, the parts are essentially like a woman. So you're going to have to use a female cath kit, but this person considers themselves a male. So they were dressed as a male. He had on like a white shirt, kind of a suit, business attire. And, but when you get down there, there's nothing that looks like penis. And so, once I went up and set up the right catheter and got in there, and got up close and personal with this person that was, they now refer to them as intersex is the appropriate word that they're using. But I, at the age of 17, working in the emergency room, had a firsthand experience with somebody who was born this way. And they had, I'm just going to go into detail about this because I think it's an important topic that really doesn't have enough coverage over it, because there's a huge piece of this that plays into why so many people think, it's okay, the trans thing and the two-spirit thing and the gay thing is okay, and that it's of God. So I, up close and personal, what was going on here, and there's variations of this in anyone who's born this way, is that they had an enlarged clitoris that looked like a small nubbin, like undeveloped penis, and where there would be the labia minora and the labia majora, which are, the two female lips for on the sides. The menorah wasn't present. There was just the two larger on the outside, but still when you opened up and put a catheter in, it presented like a normal ureter and vagina. But at the back of the vagina, there was a small sac, an undeveloped scrotum and testicles, but they were split instead of, one whole sac. It was split into two at the back of the vagina. And so I saw all the parts on one human, and it blew my mind. And nothing in my mind was ever the same again, because I went, God, you made this person, and they are neither male nor female in their sex organs. And their family chose for them to be a female when they were younger and started dressing them like a female. And then as he got older, he said, I'm not a female, I'm a male. And so I want to present as a male. But it was interesting because, God allowed me to have this experience for a reason. And they never did a surgical anything or chose one where they left this person completely intact the way that they were born. So, I actually, when I was in the New Age, had a whole class written that I was going to teach called The Tale of the Two Spirits. And I did believe in the 5 different sexes for a season of my life after coming out of Mormonism, because that mind fuck just completely screwed up my brain to where I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I still believed in Jesus. I still carried him with me, but I didn't study the Bible after I left. So I didn't understand the laws, and so that threw me off track. So to make sense of this one experience that I had to buy into all of this, right? Well, all these years, fast forward later, what I finally come to understand, the only possibility of what happened there is the generations of toxins and poisons and hormone disruptors that have been intentionally put into our environment in one way or another. They're in the water, they're in the air, they're in probably in, the chemtrails that they're spraying. They're in our body care products, which I've done a video on witchcraft in our health, in our self-care. And, there's this app called Yucca that I would go on with my daughters, and like every single thing that you click on, or you take a picture of the scanner, the barcode, and almost every ingredient that comes back, almost every product that comes back with a hormone disruptor in it. And our skin is this barrier that absorbs all of that, and then all of our hormones are disrupted. And how many generations have we been using these shampoos for that are disrupting, and they've been put into our systems? And then not only that, the government has been doing these types of experiments on humanity for way longer than we could know or imagine. So that's one thing that I think is important to notate, because there's massive communities out there of people who are intersex, who are born with both sex organs. But I think it's really important for us to start understanding that God didn't do that. Man did. I don't know. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, I think those are all really good theories. I've kind of thought about that too. Like, just because there's a consequence of something doesn't mean that it was what God would have intended. Like, God doesn't stop every consequence to be what he intended. Like, especially if he's not asked. Like, this is the whole thing, is we have, people think that Christians think that everything's predetermined, and that's not actually the truth. Like, it's we have an act of the will, like, even to ask God for things, because God wants to give us things, but like, he doesn't force his will on us. Like, God doesn't want us to be his slaves. He actually wants us to love him freely, and he doesn't force his will on us, and he doesn't force his will to be done all the time. Like, it's like, we have the ability to ask for things and to allow things, and God actually allows the natural consequence of things to occur, especially if there wasn't like intercession, right? And so a lot of things happen. It doesn't mean that everything's that's what God wanted. I don't know if people understand the difference of, there's God's permissive will, and then there's God's active will, and like and there is things like intercession and like consequences of us using our will, right? It's kind of, I guess, a little like different way to look at it. But yeah, I think, like I said, now, like, the people that are going through this, there is many different reasons why it is happening on a mass scale, and I'll never believe it just organically happened. If anybody believes that, give me a break. All of a sudden there's a Cambridge explosion of transgender people, just in nature, at this point in history, none of that, that's ridiculous. Obviously it's a consequence of something that was engineered. And so I don't necessarily think I don't hate the people and think it's their fault, or even who knows what, has been put in the food or the water, or what happened to a bunch of kids they might have pulled out in kindergarten or daycare and run some programming on them. Who knows how they got this to happen? But I definitely think it was a manipulation.
Well, they do have the technology now to be able to do sex changes in utero even. And in the cult systems, they're definitely doing that, because we have, like the other video I did this week with Brandon Kroll, we're talking about the Nimrod cult, and we're going to get more into how that shows up today. We kind of laid a biblical foundation for it. But, they have these abilities to change sex in utero, and then they're put on hormones prepubescently, and they grow up, and these people out in Hollywood appear like they have pictures of them, from birth dressed as the opposite gender, and you don't know they've been transgendered. And so there's definitely a agenda with that. But then see, where I always went back that messed me up is, instead of going to the Bible, I went to the indigenous, and I see a lot of people doing that. You go, well, indigenously speaking, within the Indian tribes, they always have these two spirits. And it was somebody who didn't feel like they were male or female. They had both spirits, and they were honored in the tribe and revered, and they wouldn't have children. And, so it's like, well, when you go back that far, if they were out living off of the land, then how, if they were born intersex or whatever, how did that happen and play out? And, the enemy has all kinds of tools and weapons against us that we don't know or understand. And it took me a while to really understand the concept that just because somebody lives out in the middle of nature on the land, that doesn't mean that they can't be influenced satanically. And there's, some interesting documentaries of people with these serpents visiting them, the serpent spirit, out, and the cannibals that live out in the middle of the forest. And so that's why we can't go and look for and to the indigenous for answers to these questions. That's why we have to go to the Word of God for answers to these questions, and then just have faith and trust in His laws. And then eventually, like with me, I feel like He did, after all those years of me praying about to understand how this person was born this way, and really going into study and trying to search out how that could have come to be outside of God's nature. The tactics and warfare of the enemy comes into play. So, so then why don't you talk a little bit also about, while we're on this topic, about the rainbow and what, you see going on there with the use of that symbol, and how it was taken from, the original purpose that God put the rainbow in the sky that He states in the Bible.
Yeah, I just, I feel like I'm always putting little memes and trying to just text people about the rainbow. But I think just because it's Pride Month, and I think it's a really good time for people to really understand how the rainbow is being used right now. It's the rainbow is a sign of God's promise, and it's a gift from God. It was a communication interdimensionally from God to humans in the Bible, and it's always been a sacred symbol of the God of the Bible. And most Christians know that, but the rainbow, it's very deliberate why the Satanists chose the rainbow. It's to mock God, and then also calling it pride is also to mock God. And so it's kind of funny, because I was talking about how I'm trying to get more and more away from secular counseling because it's just so satanic. But and a lot of my friends that are working in the secular system right now, it's really trendy to be a transition counselor, and because they're really amoral about it. They're like, this is what people want. They want transition counseling. It's really trendy. It's kind of the vanguard of counselors right now. If you want to be on top of what's cool, it's being a transition counselor, helping kids, it's and it was kind of funny to me, because one of the really common things they use in counseling is writing gratitude journals, right? And now this one person told me that they have their clients writing pride journals, like of things they're proud of. And I was like, anyways, it's just another example of like just like how ridiculous this stuff is getting. But to talk about the rainbow, so a lot of things that Satanists do, they want to harness your psychic energy and your emotional energy and like even your physical energy. And so a lot of times they do that through ignorance, right? So they'll have like a big celebration and you think you're just going down and celebrating one thing, but they're kind of generating and harvesting the energy off you coming out, and it's like what you think you're celebrating and what they've set up for you to celebrate are two different things. And they do that all the time, whether it's like rock concerts or festivals or Canada Day or like whatever. They have all these different things that
Holidays.
they're doing one thing, and yeah, Christmas, all of it, right? Like, and so it's like that is a form of vampiring your energy. And so the rainbow in particular has a few different meanings. Like it's was from Wizard of Oz, which is one of the old MK Ultra programming scripts that a lot of people that have been put through satanic ritual abuse or MK Ultra and some of the original programs post World War II were all given Wizard of Oz programming. And so over the rainbow was a code word that was always used for going into a different ego state and switching altars, because a lot of the programming in SRA is that they think they live in parallel universes. So like if they do something in one universe, it didn't really happen in the other universe. And that's kind of one way they get them to do things they wouldn't normally do in their normal life. And so one of the code words is over the rainbow. That means you're going to like maybe do something you wouldn't normally do in your normal life, right? And so they have this rainbow everywhere. And again, it's that virtue signaling. Well, people think, oh, I'm just going to put it in my business because that's me being inclusive and nice and non-judgmental and, letting everybody be free who they are and being safe, seen and supported and all these other, MK Ultra terms we're using now. And so they love this because I really recommend people read the book, The Black Awakening by Russ Dizdar, because he really lays out this major MK Ultra program that they've been working on since World War II, which involves the United Nations, which is based on Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and the 7 rays, which is the rainbow, and all this, programming. It's all connected to this rainbow, right? This program, it's post World War II. They've been taking major people out of society, taking them for programming, whether they're bloodline families or not. They take them from the general population. They've been just taking people out, programming them with this basic, like, huge global program, which is the world takeover, which is the Antichrist programming, which whether people are Christian or not, it doesn't really matter if you believe in it. There still is a program that's been put in place that they're going to bring forth, whether you believe in this stuff or not. So like pretending that it doesn't apply to you because you're not a Christian or you don't believe in it, like, believe me, this program is going to affect you when they bring it out. And they've been working on it for generations. And one of the ways, like when they train the children, is to make the children believe that they already have won everything and that they already own everything and that they already taken over everything and that they just want to externalize the hierarchy, which is to make it public, right? And so the way they're externalizing the hierarchy is to bring forth the rainbow. And like you'll see this in a lot of new age books, like Barbara Marx Hubbard was talking about like the rainbow nebulous and like the rainbow's always the symbol of this new reset or this new, going over the rainbow, or like, like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like it's very symbolic of this new world takeover that they have. And so when they put it everywhere, and they're just using the LGBT people for this agenda. Like they're just using them as pawns, like to basically bring this rainbow programming in everywhere. And so a lot of people that have been programmed for this Black Awakening or externalization of the hierarchy, they are dissociative and they don't know they're part of the agenda, but that rainbow is speaking to their subconscious. So on a conscious level, they may just see the rainbow as Pride Month, but on a subconscious level, that programming is symbolizing world takeover, which is why they have all the police saluting the rainbow flag. They have police wearing rainbow badges and rainbow cars, because they're showing you, we own the police, we own the governments. Like Canada has at Parliament, you know, putting up the rainbow flag. The Catholic Church made it all lit up in rainbows. They have all the rainbows in the church. They're basically showing you that they own everything, and they're bringing the rainbow out. Like, we're going over the rainbow as society, and like that's what it really means. And so I just want people to keep that in mind when they're going around in Pride Month and seeing all this rainbow happening, that like this is something you should really be educating yourself on and being aware of, because it doesn't mean what you think it means. And that doesn't mean that the original rainbow is bad, because I've had arguments with people too saying, oh, it's God's rainbow. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But that's what Satanists do. They take one thing and it means something to you, and then it means something different to them. And then you're, you know, waving the flag, but it's helping their agenda. And you're just being used as a pawn.
Well, and that's where I used to love symbolism and wearing symbolism and, you know, using it in different ways. And at one point I even I started a Facebook page called Coalition to Take Back the Rainbow, because it bothered me so much, because I wanted to use it as a symbol in like my energy healing method and stuff like that. And, you know, I have a little pair of shoes that are rainbow tivas, and people just assume it means something that it doesn't mean when I wear them. And I don't really care. I'm going to wear it regardless. But, you know, I find it ironic and kind of cute, the way God works sometimes with this stuff, because, well, one of the things that he showed me was just to stay away from symbolism altogether, which is why he told me, like, I don't wear any symbols anymore. I got rid of all my shirts that have anything on it. Like, I just stay completely away from symbolism, because
colors.
All of it. It's all been perverted, and he's taken everything to mean something. And even if it is God's symbol, like, God doesn't need a symbol. Like, he doesn't need anything. I don't need to symbolize anything. Even the cross, you know? And so, but the thing that's ironic about it to me is, when I read the Bible, one of the things that I feel like is super important that a lot of humanity misses in reading the Bible is understanding what's not said. Because sometimes what he doesn't say is more important than what he did say. Or sometimes what something means and the purpose of it, the mirror of what that means, is also just as important. And so there's a lot of filling in the gaps and lines when it comes to the Bible. So in the Bible, he says, you know, I hung the bow in the sky as a sign and a promise that he wasn't going to flood the earth again, right? Because it was so hard for Noah to go through the flood and have God destroy the entire world, that he just like begged God, like, you can't ever do this again. This is just too much for a human being to have to be the sole man left on the entire earth alone, right? So, yeah, God gave him a rainbow and said, like, I'll never flood the earth again. But when you understand the whole big picture of why God flooded the earth, which was these occult rituals that were playing out and the perversion that had taken place in man and Nephilim and the giants, the perversion that took place of God's way. And so he kills essentially all of the perverts on the planet, and everything that's been perverted, he destroys, and then hangs a rainbow in the sky. And then all of the perversion re-assimilates itself and comes and brings itself back forward and claims that rainbow and says, this is going to be ours. You promised Noah that you weren't going to drown us again. So we're going to show up again and do this whole thing all over and claim your promise. And so then on another layer, he said, well, I won't flood the earth again. But he certainly didn't say he's not going to destroy. He said, this time I'm coming fire. And so they're over there like, doodly do, like, we've got our rainbow and we can totally live in sin and be prideful about it, you know, which pride's never good in the Bible. That the reversal of that is that they're going to be destroyed through fire this time. And they're claiming that as their symbol. But even though they've inverted it, God said, I won't flood it. I won't flood again. I won't destroy, but I will through fire. And so they're claiming that symbol, and I feel like to their own condemnation, because even though it's a sign of promise, with all of God's covenant promises also come a covenant curse. And the covenant curse is if you don't keep this promise and you go and do everything, like I just wiped out the whole earth, but that doesn't mean I'm not coming back and going to wipe out a good portion of people again. I will leave a very small remnant of the righteous, is what he says, but I will destroy with fire this time. So they've claimed that. If you're claiming the rainbow and you're sporting that, like there's a good chance you might be setting yourself up for fire.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing people don't understand is like they think they're mocking God by like basically using God. They think they're using God's nature against them. Like, oh God, you can't go back on your own promise. Like we'll just use your promise and like dance on it, right? And it's like God won't be mocked. Like he's literally letting them set up like with like he is putting the sign of his promise all over, but they're doing it as a mocking, but yet God's sign of this promise is all over right now. Like it's the double meaning, right? Like and it's weird because in Canada, I don't know what's going on there right now, but there's fires being set everywhere right now by arsonists, like all over Canada. Like, and so obviously this was like an orchestrated event because it's not just in a few places, it's like everywhere all at once. And they've arrested a few people like for arson. So like it's like people are doing it on purpose. But I mean, it's kind of symbolic that it's like during Pride Month all of a sudden, but it's like they're the ones lighting the fire, but like it's still, this is how God's will is going to come to pass, right? Like it's like everything that people think they're doing against it is actually being used for it. It's like that they can't see their role in it, right? And so it's like they think they're mocking God, but they're actually like mocking themselves. And so it's like, yeah, it's
Well,
like it's looking at it from a different view than what the surface looks like always, right?
well, and that's what he told me is that the wicked destroy the wicked. And he's using the wicked to destroy the wicked, and they set up these fires and they think it's going to play out in their favor. And but they're warning their own people like, yeah, God is going to come in fire, because all of these little fires that have been happening, like you said, I feel like are the warning signs of the bigger fires to come. And what is going to come, just I don't think it's too far around the corner, to when some major things are going to start playing out. I was given a word of prophecy that I put out on my channel about New York City. And it's funny because a lot of people talk about, the destruction that's going to come to New York City. And it seems like such an obvious place, but it was a really clear dream he gave me. And I woke up and it was like, I knew I needed to like put this warning out there. And it was actually kind of veered more towards lukewarm Christians, who, we know that's the danger zone, because if you're not hot or cold, he's going to spit you out. And so it's fascinating how things are warming up in that way. And like you said, like they're going to destroy themselves, and they're going to destroy each other. And he's not going to ask Israel to have blood on their hands again this time around. We don't have to go out and fight a war, get a militia together. He says in the Bible, your wrestle's not with flesh and blood, it's with principalities, which is why the spiritual warfare and the courts of heaven are so important, because that's where our war is at. But we're fighting through spiritual means. That's where we have to go in order to fight this battle. But in the physical, those who are going to destroy themselves, that's what the civil war is. These civil wars that will rise up, is it's not just civil between state to state, it's civil between cult to cult. These cults, they hate each other. I know a lot of these people, like
They all hate each other.
Facts. They have this whole plan to destroy the world. You know what? They're going to destroy themselves. They're going to, and it's funny that Ouroboros too, people think that's, God showed that to me in a vision, said they're going to swallow their own tail. I don't need you guys to do anything. Like they're going to destroy themselves. And that swallowing of its own tail, I know some people think that's about like, what is it? Immortality or reincarnation, or I can't remember exactly what they hold that symbol to mean. But if you swallow your own tail, you're choking on your own self. You're going to destroy yourself. And when the wicked destroy the wicked and they come in and they start having their civil wars and fighting amongst each other, we're just going to sit back and watch them fall. And he's going to, remove us from the crossfire if we're in a loyal relationship. But one other part that I kind of wanted to touch on about that is with, the gay and trans agenda. My mom, who is my family, who's in the bloodline in Mormonism, so she had a lot of insider information. used to teach me stuff when I was little about the world that a lot of other people didn't seem to know during those times, and about how there was a gay and trans agenda. She taught me that when I was younger, about how there's literally agenda to turn people gay and turn people trans. And it's one of the reasons that they do that was because there's the god Baphomet that they worship, which is a god that has both sex organs. And there is the basis of Freemasonry, which is what really runs the whole world. These cults are all run by men who are in love with men and lovers of self. And so Satan's sex in those cults is sodomy. And in order to normalize what these men are doing and make them feel all powerful and not feel, they've had to remain hidden for so long, and they've had to keep these secret oaths. And this is one of the ways they communicate with each other without having to talk in order to keep their secrets, is through this passing these spirits and secrets through sex. If they can get the whole world to turn to their, then they don't feel like the odd man out and have to be so secretive about their stuff, because they're coming out more and more in your face with all of it. But, just kind of one little observation that I have about why do they want to do this and turn everybody that direction? And because, misery loves company. And that's just one of the agendas that and you hear, it's not even a secret anymore. Like my daughter sent me an Instagram the other day. I can't remember what the rapper's name is, but he talks right out. He's like, oh, he's receiving a reward. And he says, I'd like to thank the gay agenda. And then somebody's asking him in an interview after, like, what's the gay agenda? And he's like, oh, we go stand in a circle and draw a star and drink blood. And, they're trying to turn everybody gay. And, the host is kind of laughing, but he's not kidding. They know they need to go out and say this stuff now, because they think, oh, nobody can actually believe that this is what we're doing. So yeah, fascinating stuff there.
Yeah, I think there's multiple reasons. I think you hit on some of them from the reading I've done. There's kind of like quite a few different reasons for that agenda. Like part of it is just population control, just they want control over all reproduction. Like they basically want everyone to be infertile, and you're gonna have to go pay money to go have a baby, and they'll make it for you and give it to you. And that's what they want eventually, right? Is just to control all reproduction. And so part of that is just having everybody separated and dating each other. And then they also want pedophilia, because then you'll re-traumatize the next generation coming in and make them have the trauma response, to make them more programmable. It'll kind of be like a self-working clock. And then they also, it's kind of like, so like men and women are opposites, and God made us that way, but we fight, right? But we grow from the fighting. We're not, it's so funny when they try to make men and women we're not supposed to be the same. We're supposed to actually kind of be the opposites, and then a third thing's created. And in an occult manner, they know that, right? But they want a distorted version of that. And so another agenda of keeping everybody polarized is that they'll never actually be tempered by the opposites to expand, right? And so you'll see this with people that are married, and they'll fight a lot, and then in their older years they're really cute together, because they've kind of expanded through this growth of having to be stuck with each other for so long and work it out, right? And that's God made us up that way, right? And he put the sex there to help with that, right? Because that's part of what's going to bond people to be able to do that. If they just had their sex in their marriage, that would kind of temper that, conflict with them and that. So this all, God made it all work in a certain way for certain reasons. And so when they ruin the marriage, but then they also want the inversion of people being gay, because it keeps them also in an emotionally more childlike state, right? Which again would promote more pedophilia, because, and you see this, there's certain towns in China where I think it's Japan, where they everybody's really childlike, they're almost little grade fours, they wouldn't even kiss a boy on the lips, they're asexual, they don't even want to be around the other gender, it's but they're very childlike, right? That's exactly what the controllers want everybody to be right? Very emotionally a little child. So there's kind of there's multiple agendas that kind of intersect with this whole agenda to the gay agenda. And again, it's just inverting anything that God made in his way, that God made the universe work like a clock with like different things all working together. Like, so anything they can interfere with is gonna like give them a power differential by keeping people out of their natural state. And so that's just one of like many ways that they do that. But again, I think the sexual component is like number one. Like, it's the number one way to traumatize a child. It's the number one way to do mind control. It's the number one way to like just mess a human being up. It's the number one way to like mess with the relationships. Like, I think people try to like take sex out of context and make it, again, that really medicalized or just like a physical activity. But like, the sex is very, very key to like everything in the universe and in humans and in our physical body and our spiritual bodies. And like the whole way that sexuality is being distorted right now is like one of the main tools. And like, I think people, I don't like to tell people what to do or what to believe, or like, I don't want to come across like I'm judging anybody, but like, I just really recommend to people that they really give like sexuality some deep thought about like what it is, what it's for, how it's being used against them, and how it's like being used for so many other agendas like right now, because I think it's pretty obvious. And I think for a lot of people, like seeing what they're doing with children and sexuality is like really a line for a lot of people, where they're okay with it being done to adults. But like when they see, and like I just ask people to really question, like, why do you think they're doing this? You know, like, why do you think they want this in the schools and to children? Like, it's really like being used for psychology, for the mind control of like psychology, mind control, you know, like.
Well, and it is the most, the consequences and ramifications of things of a sexual nature can ruin or make your life more so than any other one thing on the planet. You know, I mean, it's just such a powerful weapon. Absolutely. They're going to use it, you know, against us. And it's hard in a miserable world because people are looking for a quick fix to feel good. And when a drug doesn't work, then, hey, let's just have sex. But you don't realize the toxic poison that you are getting involved in when you just go around having sex with people. You know, I definitely learned that the hard way. But also about infertility, what you were mentioning there, I think it's interesting because I always I'm always looking at that underneath thing that usually where society is fighting against something going, this isn't okay, this isn't okay. I'm over here kind of like going, well, how is God using this? How is this God's will? You know, even with like the jab, like, and the fact that a lot of people are saying, well, it's causing infertility. And I feel like this is one of those weapons that he allows the enemy to use against us to see where you stand with God. Because if you're going to go take something like that and become infertile, then while we're in this season of the division of the wheat and the tares, and he's probably going to come pretty soon and start doing some burning of the wicked anyways. And of course, this isn't, you know, directed towards anybody who naively and innocently didn't know what they were doing and took that, because I do believe, I know in my warfare manual, there's a repentance prayer for it, and anything, God can heal anything and undo it. But I do believe he's using all of these things as infertility for his own too. Even the wicked, anything that the wicked does to destroy the wicked, to do evil, is considered the left hand of God. God has a right hand and a left hand, and he uses the wicked to serve his will. And if the wicked are having all these generational bloodlines and he wants them to stop producing children on the earth so that he can raise up a righteous seed, then it's useful to God to have people who are not godly people become infertile. You know did that make sense the way I explained that? So, you know, it's one of those side effects that I always kind of see and just kind of giggle inside, because I try not to give too much power to the enemy and go, oh, you know, everything's satanic, it is. But how is this God's? How is this God's will? And how is he using it in his kingdom to further, you know, to bring a righteous seed and to further what he's trying to do on the earth? And why is he allowing this to play out? Because there's always a higher reason, you know, for even with the wicked that's not being done. Obviously not like, that's not to say that he wants or people to be brutally raped or whatever, but he does turn all things for our good. And I just see a lot of these consequences that are playing out that people are kind of fighting against, with infertility being one of them, is one of the ways they're going to end up punishing their own selves, you know, like because how many
Yeah.
of them take that shot or are going to. That's one of the prayers that I do when I do warfare prayers for like the kingdom, when I'm praying for humanity in general, or when I'm praying against the kingdom of darkness, is I ask God to send a curse of infertility and impotency among the, these not just men but women, all abusers, that they become, dysfunctional sexually, and that they can't function in that regard anymore, so they will stop destroying, our
Well, that's what
children.
happens. Like you see that even with the pornography, like people end up impotent. Like they literally can't like have any sexuality. Like like it does it does end up in a bad place. Like every sin starts out fun and ends up not fun. So it's like learning and a lot of like what Satan gets away with is by default of our ignorance, right? So just like people to arm themselves with how things work so that they're not, even in court, it's like a default judgment because you didn't show up. You know what I mean? Like it's like that's how so much of this works. Like and if so people start to just really understand the legality of like every single thing. And a lot of people feel like victims, like they're like, oh, like what, God must hate me because all this bad stuff happened. And it's like, there's actually only one set of universal laws. And even though it seems like some people, like the law's not applying to them, you're like, well, why did this person get away with this? And like, I didn't even mean to do that. And this happened to me. And, so it seemed like people start to believe that we're under different sets of laws. And like the only different set of laws you really have is coming under Christ or not. Because if you're not, then you're already in Satan's kingdom. Like that, those are all upon, you're already done. Like, right. And so your only chance really is to actually come under Christ, because then actually you have something to present in court, like, and that's it. Like it's really that simple. And if you don't, then like you're just playing a game without a card to play, right? And so a lot of like understanding this stuff, it's like it seems really complicated, but it's actually like pretty simple. And a lot of it's just default of your ignorance and not knowing. And like that's a lot of how our court systems work in the third dimension, right? Is like default stuff for people not understanding the law, people not being able to get a lawyer, like not being able to understand the court system. Like that's a representation of what's happening spiritually, right? Like ignorance is their greatest tool, like really.
Well, and that's what the Bible essentially is, a book of law. A law. It's like the law manual for the spirit realm. There's plenty of law manuals. There's, people want to go, oh, let's go change the law and let's go to the government and change this and that. And it's like, well, we have all these laws in place and they don't obey the ones that you have. Maybe you should stop picketing and go read the Bible and figure out what God's laws are and start applying those. And the biblical law behind what you just said in the Bible is that you can't serve two masters. You'll either love the one or hate the other. And if you think that, well, I don't have to serve Jesus and I don't have to accept him, and then like you said, then you are under satanic rule. And
Right.
Whether you believe it or not, you are. And you might go, well, I don't have any problems. Well, that's because you're under satanic law and he's the God of this world. And
Yeah, let them collect later. He's not worried about you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what happens, kind of teetering. And I do believe, that a lot of the people that we know who are really good people and don't necessarily aren't in a covenant with Jesus Christ, but they, hate the wickedness, and they've been kind of ruined by the religious spirit and false religion, and don't want anything to do with God because of that. I think that there's a special place for them in God's kingdom and in his plans, that there will be a season where they will turn, and I think, like it says in the parable of the workers of the vineyard, like it doesn't matter what time you show up for work, you're going to get paid the same reward. And as soon as shit hits the fan and things start getting ugly on the earth, and then they start crying out for Jesus, because when stuff gets even atheists admit that, in times of dire trouble, they're praying. They find themselves praying inside, so when things get ugly, what's up?
Atheists are funny because they just decide not to believe in God because they're mad at him. And like, it's really funny, right? Like, and a lot of people that choose not to believe in God is because they don't like him, because they don't understand him. And so it's like they think he's mean, so they decide not to believe in him. And like, that's a really childish, like like pretending the boogeyman won't get you if you stick your head on the pillow. Like that's kind of the same level of maturity. And like people are like, well, God's mean, I don't understand his ways, and I don't think I should be a sinner, and like all this stuff. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you like it. Like if you're not God. It's set up that way. You can either recognize your place and then play from like your actual reality of where your place is, which there is things available to you. If you know your place and your relationship and how it works, then you actually have like things you can do. Or if you pretend none of it applies to you because you don't like it, then you're like in a really disempowered place, and like you're not actually preventing any the consequences from you by being in that mindset. But people kind of feel like they have some agency by like, things aren't going to apply to me if I don't believe in it, and I won't believe in it if I don't like it. And it's kind of like, I don't know. Again, I think I don't know anybody that really understands the Bible and thinks God's mean. Like it's people just think they're mean because they don't actually understand it. Like and so I just tell people, like, keep looking into it and studying it until it starts to make sense, because you only see it in that way because you're not understanding it correctly. If you
Well,
think that God's mean.
yeah, and I've seen people close to me reject Jesus's role. You know, I've seen people who still kind of believe in God, but it's like, well, I don't need Jesus. I'm God, or I don't need a Lord or a Savior or whatever. And these are a lot of the people I find myself doing intercession for, because a lot of these people are actually from bloodlines, and some of these people who, like myself, who were maybe expendable or used in a different way, or didn't know the fullness of what their family was involved in. They who have actually sought God spiritually, have sought Jesus Christ, but because they don't understand the Bible is a law book, and that everybody's like almost required to get a law degree in order to be able to function and be actually free in this world. Or else, like you said, if you don't show up to court, then you just are going to be indicted one way or another. And that's the position they find themselves in, is just by default, that they are being attacked, and they sought God and they tried. But for instance, having grown up in Mormonism, what I've seen with a lot of people around me is people who maybe left Mormonism like I did, and then went down many other spiritual paths seeking healing or whatever, and they just can't seem to find it, and they don't know why, and they feel like they're kicking against the pricks and can't figure out why he's not there and why he's not showing up. And it's because we haven't been given the proper tools. And I have one friend that I told, at one point, when he was saying he didn't need Jesus or whatever. And it was like, well, how can you even say that? Because all of the places that we've gone, both of us together in our past, to seek him, it was actually Lucifer who we thought was playing the role of Jesus Christ. And so we were, in these false religions, in, cults. Both of us were in a lot of offshoot cults, smaller groups. And God is a fourth watch God, literally, because he'll allow you to look in a lot of different places for him, so that that that's where he's not at. So that when you find him, you're never going back, because now oh, that's where I find God. And that's what I see him do a lot with people who didn't have it figured out or were born into these families, because once you enter into that covenant, there's no going back. You're sealed. You're for eternity. You're, praising God because of what he saved you out from. And those are the people that I really feel for, and find myself doing intercession prayer. I find myself often praying to God and going, these people who love you, who I know have sought you, who have prayed and wanted to have a spiritual experience, but didn't know how to get you to show up because of all the iniquity on their bloodline. So the enemy has had all this legal right to them, and they couldn't find you because all they kept meeting was the enemy, I think those are a lot of the people that he's going to show up last minute and pluck from the flames, and just go in and do like awesome, amazing, miraculous, supernatural miracles for, some of these people who tried and didn't know, just being so lost. And then on the other hand, those who rejected, like God said, I would rather that you were hot or cold. Those that are cold, those are some people who are cold against God, are more like Jesus than some Christians because they hate religion, because they hate the disgust that goes on behind it, because they hate, whether they know or not. Some people do, some people don't. Um, the what's going on behind religion, what's the false religion, what's underneath it all, what's under the temples, what's under, it's almost like they unknowingly or knowingly sense the horrific injustice and murder that's happening, whether it's children or whatever going on behind it. And they're just like, no, I don't want anything to do with that stuff. So God would rather that they were cold. They're in a safer spot, the cold, people like you and I know, who are good, solid people, but just don't want anything to do with God right now because they don't know what that looks like. But they wouldn't hurt.
They're being more godlike than someone who just thinks that they're good because they went to church, like on a technicality, right? Like, and I always, again, it's that inversion, right? Like our whole culture is inverted, like where we are so used to shopping for what is going to be of benefit to us, whether that's like a marriage partner or a friend or a job, or like, it's all like, how does this benefit me? And like people do that with religion. They're like, oh, I like this one because I get this and that out of it. Or like, you know what I mean? Like nobody goes shopping for religion. And then you get to Christianity, you're like, oh, that's like, why would I want that one? It's pretty harsh, like it's not all warm and fuzzy like the other one, like that have all these things that are good for me in it, and it's like, it's again just that inversion, because if you really understand the gospel and what happened, and you actually know your place, and you actually know you're actually not owed anything, and that you're a created being, and that God actually can do whatever he wants with you, like he made you, and you're not like entitled to all these things that Satan's gonna like prop you up with pride and tell you you're entitled to all these things. Like you're actually not entitled to anything. And when you realize that, but then you realize what God's actually given you, which is like life and an avenue to her life, then you're like, whoa, like I wasn't entitled to any of this, and I'm being offered this. And like you start to realize like that God did you a solid. And like really when you become a Christian, you're like, oh, how can I be a part of this like amazing gift, right? Like how can I be like what can I give, to be just a part of like this, realizing what's been given to me when I was owed nothing, right? Which is totally different than going shopping for like, what can I get out of this? Like, can I manifest some money, or can I get like guardian angels, or like all these things people are trying to get? Like, it's so the inversion of really like recognizing that you were given something when you were owed nothing, which a lot of people will try to twist and be like, oh, I don't like being told that I'm nothing and this and that. And it's like, but you are. Like, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. And like, God still loved you, and you've been given a gift that like you actually weren't entitled to. Like that's actually more special than thinking you were owed something, right? Like,
well, yeah, and that's that gift of humility that's talked about in the Bible. And he says in the last days that people will become lovers of self. And that's what's interesting. And that's when I share with people a lot, is like, people are so big on self-love right now. It's like, well, in the Bible it says this about lovers of self, it doesn't make it a good thing. And, you're supposed to hate your life unto death. And so if you, like you said, if you understand all of those laws, it absolutely changes everything. And that's when things start to become good, when you actually understand.
Exactly. And you're free from all this false stuff being sold to you that you're never getting, right? Like it's totally inverted. And that's why when people take little snippets out of Christianity, or just like they don't get it in a whole context, which again is very satanic to compartmentalize things, take them out of context, just give you a snippet. It doesn't make sense. Like you need, like I always tell people, like I won't tell you what to believe, but like you have to understand the gospel as a whole, because it's a whole story with a whole thing, and none of the parts work outside of the context of the whole story. Like it all works together, and you have to understand all of it, and then you can decide to accept it or reject it. But like if you just take little parts that doesn't make sense, you're going to reject it and be confused and not understand it. Like, because if you really understand it, it's good, but if you take little parts of it, they look bad. So it's like,
well, which is why it's so important to actually walk away from organized religion and get into a relationship and just get into the Bible and really understand the foundation of who God is and what that relationship is inside of yourself, and not have it being infiltrated by anything outside of yourself, by, false religion and corruption, and to be able to go, oh, I'm the hand as the body in the body of Christ. I'm the hand. I've been trying to, be an ear this whole time, and I thought could do all these things that I wasn't made to do. I'm the hands, so I need to do something different, as being a part of the body of Christ, because, people talk about manifestation, and I lived in that mindset for years, and you can try and manifest, but people eventually leave the new age because it literally doesn't work. Like, you can kind of manifest, and people who are really under Satan and use magic and stuff, like, their stuff works for longer, because they are like, if you're a good person and you try to go down that path, it's not going to work for very long. If you have a good heart and you don't want to hurt other people. When that kind of manipulation works is when you're happy to hurt other people and you're in a complete covenant of darkness with the enemy. Then you can get that stuff to work for generations and generations and generations of wickedness in your family and on your bloodline. But, otherwise, it doesn't really work.
Well, I always tell people, like, if you think that doing natural magic or, and I'm not saying, like, this stuff does work to a level, but I'm like, if you think that was enough, do you really think the people running the world would be using demonic entities and doing child sacrifice if their crystals and tarot cards were enough? Like, if they know how to do all of this stuff, so if that was enough, do you really think they'd have to go and do these other way hardcore things? Like, no. That other stuff is just to get you to a level where you're willing to do those other hardcore things, because those other hardcore things have to actually happen for the real manifestations to happen. There's going to be blood sacrifice. There's going to be demonic entities. There's going to be possession. There's going to be like ritual, like that. That's why these groups are doing that stuff, because that's what it takes for it to really work, is you are actually having other things work through you. It's not you doing it yourself. That other stuff's just a road to there. So I can tell you that, the people ruling the world are not doing it based just off astrology. Like, they wish they could do that, but they've had to do way worse things to get their spells to work.
Well, and so then lead me into, from here, to your knowledge and understanding and what you know about how that all plays into Mormonism.
Well, I think we should do a whole show on Mormonism. But I mean, I think just like kind of to leave it on a note is that Mormonism is just a front for Freemasons, and same with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and same with actually most of the religions out there, including a lot of the mainstream Christian churches, are just fronts for the Masonic religion, which is the Egyptian religion, which is actually out of the Bible. So surprise, surprise, it's all connected. Like, it's not separate things. It's all kind of connected to the same story being played on the earth. But yeah, the Mormon religion, I'd love to do a whole show on that with you. I've done a couple shows on it, just because it's so big in Canada. And there's so many facets to the Mormon religion, because it's a corporation. It's a perfectly set up religion. It works like clockwork. Like, you couldn't have made a better, written up a business plan for the perfect religion. Like, Mormonism set up perfectly. It runs perfectly like a machine. And so it's really based on all Freemasonry stuff. It's all there in the symbols if you have eyes to see. It's but they've got it. It's a well-oiled machine, like politically, economically, like all of it. It's just set up perfectly. It's like,
so for people who say, like, oh, well, but it was good in the beginning, it was just infiltrated, what do you say to that?
No, I think it was set up. I think it was set up by interdimensionals from the beginning to be an offshoot. I think that was the spirit behind it from the beginning, and I think that it was always set up to be a sex cult. And I think it's a branch of mind control, offshoot off of the Freemasonic churches. Is the way I see it. Not to say there's not. I mean, I know some Mormons are like, I'm not cutting down people in the church or under that spirit. Like, the Mormons that I know are like the most like genuine human beings that would give you the shirt off their back and are like so wanting to do the right thing and be a good person, and like they are deceived. And again, I'm never cutting down somebody for being under that Mormonism, because again, it's a deception, and I see them as deceived and enslaved, just like I would with somebody who's in the transgender movement or any of the, it's like, I think people can have the purest intentions and end up deceived. And it's like, I have total compassion for that. And I would just want to help educate people in any way that I can to help them break through that, and to look at it differently.
So at the higher echelons of the church, by those who like run it, the presidents and the general authorities and all of that, for people who think that, like I said, it was just infiltrated, or there's, evil people there's cults hidden in the cult, or there's satanic cult hidden in the church. What do you know about it, maybe from the beginning, that to say that, that's not true? Where do you get the idea from that it's, been a sex cult from its inception?
Wasn't Joseph Smith a Freemason?
Yeah.
From the beginning. Yeah, like he was from the beginning. And I mean, I don't know the whole story of he said the spirit visited him and gave him all the knowledge. Like, I mean, to me, that's like an interdimensional, it was a doctrine of demons from the beginning that worked through him to set that up through the Masonic offshoot. Like, there's so much history. I mean, the Mormons, like, that's why I said we should do a whole other show, because I think we're going over 3 hours for this one. But like, I would love to do like a whole show on Mormons, because there's so many different aspects to it. And I know that people like to just say Mormon as like this giant umbrella, and there is a giant umbrella of Mormons, but like, there's so much there. It's huge. I mean, the Mormon, it's like a huge part of the globe is under the Mormon church. Like, it's and it's fastly growing, and they are having tons of babies. And I mean, it's exponentially like going to triple in size. And like, I mean, people really need to start, like, it's not like just some little group that is not affecting anybody else. Like, they're taking over all kinds of like police forces, governments. Like, they want to get them in the White House if they're there already, but I mean, they want to get them as president. Like, the thing about the Mormon church too is they put a lot of people in a lot of places. Like, they pay for a lot of people to go to school so that they can put them in strategic positions. Like, they want to have like their own doctors, their own police, their own politicians, their own everything, right? So they've been working really, really hard. They're definitely not lazy. They have been working really hard since the beginning to expand, and all the people involved in it work really selflessly and hard for the church. Like I said, they're the most hardworking people I know. Like, they've really been like doing a lot of work that I don't think people are really aware of.
Yeah, well, I've definitely seen that myself and can witness that that's true, that they're really taking over everything. And yeah, the breeding program is huge, and their genealogy, they're focused on the bloodlines and everything like that is massive. And it's worldwide. But I do like what you said about, not having been Mormon, you speaking about it as, how did you put it? The angel that visited him, what did you call that?
An interdimensional.
Yeah. Okay.
It's actually in there. Like, who is Moroni? Like, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's kind of what the Holy Spirit showed me is the Book of Mormon, the Nephites, the Nephi, who's the main prophet in the Book of Mormon, and that is linked to Nephilim, because God didn't allow that to happen just for nothing. That the name of the prophet Nephi and neophytes, which is a newly sodomized Freemason, and then the Nephites and Nephi being the main prophet, that those words are all synonymous for a reason. And that I do believe that Joseph Smith was of a Nephilim hybrid bloodline, and that he was visited by probably fallen angels, and given a false teaching. But the thing that blows my mind about Mormonism that I can't discount is how much truth, which is why it's really tricky, and why I think that it has gathered such a huge, massive crowd, like you said, around the world. Because how can you deceive so many people? You're going to have a lot of truth. And some of it, even though a lot of it is conflicts with the Bible, a lot of it aligns with the Bible. And so that's where it gets tricky, because I think that's why it was inspired by the fallen, because they have enough truth from the spiritual realms to know how to do a really good job of deceiving a massive amount of people. Because one of the things about Mormonism is that when I go, I didn't know a lot about a lot of other Christian religions growing up because I was pretty sheltered. But since I've left and really gone in and sought out, all different kinds of ministries and religions and looking for something else, not necessarily for myself, but just looking into all of it and being open to find people who are speaking truth and teaching truth. A lot of the things that Mormonism does have inside its religion is why they get off and get away with so much of their, the testimony that they always bear of it being the the only true church on the earth, or the most true, or however they all say it, and there's a level of truth to that, I have to say. And the reason is because they do have a lot of things that a lot of other religions don't have that is biblical. Like, for instance, they do have the baptism by immersion, which is how Jesus was baptized. They do have the Holy Spirit through the laying on of hands. When you go read the Bible and it talks about how he laid hands on and gave the Holy Spirit, like, these are gifts you don't necessarily see being given in a lot of other Christian religions, like passing Holy Spirit through the laying on of hands, or the organization of the church being set up in the same pattern as the priesthood that Jesus developed with his apostles, or the fact that there is, a true Melchizedek priesthood that it talks about in the Bible, the priesthood of Melchizedek, that they have this counterfeit of that. So I've started kind of coming to believe, the more I've studied, that Mormonism is such a deceiving cult because it is such a perfect counterfeit for a true pattern of and I don't want to say religion, of the way that Jesus taught, the way through the straight and narrow, and all of those things that he set up, that they have those patterns very similar and very true to the pattern that Jesus set them up under. And I think that Satan knew that in order to really get a huge mass of people before the end time and have this massive cult of Freemasons, that he was going to need to use this pattern. And I do believe that's why the Book of Mormon does have truth enough that when you read it, I read that book so many times it's not even funny. And like, people just kind of go, oh, how could you ever believe that? Or like, there's something to it. There's truth in it. It's definitely an inspired book. I just believe it's inspired by fallen angels, and that there is truth in it. And some of it may even be literal history from the Nephilim. I can't say for sure, but it's not just to be dismissed, but it's definitely a cult, and it's definitely a counterfeit. I can say that. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting how you put that, not even having been Mormon.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's perfectly, like, it's like, the demons have all the time in the world they're studying everything and then coming up with new things. Like they really did a good job with the Mormon church. Like, it's perfectly set up. They really, like, I'd be surprised if they could top it.
Yeah.
Like, I really would. It's too perfectly set up, and in every single way, every part of it. It's like, they really set it up from the beginning to just run like a perfect clock,
Well, and on Sean McCann's show, I encourage anybody to go and look at that, where I actually open the Book of Mormon on his show, which I didn't know he wasn't even like really Christian or anything. So I thought he would have some grasp of what I was saying. But I don't know if it totally went over his head. But I opened the Book of Mormon because there is a part in there where I feel like what God did was gave these Nephilim the right to give this book to sound like they were condemning the world outside of this religion, but what they were doing is condemning their own selves and revealing who they really are, because it talks in, I think it's First Nephi 13, if I remember right, about the church, the great and abominable church, this prophecy about the church of Satan, which is this great and abominable church. And it goes into all these details of what that looks like. And it hit me one day. I hadn't even read the Book of Mormon, obviously in years I'd left, but I remembered that, and I went back to it and I opened it up and I was reading it, and it blew my mind, because I was like, they're talking about their own selves. It's like the Book of Mormon's like anytime it's talking about something evil, it's like it's talking about the organization itself. So it's kind of like that supernatural mirror of its own wickedness. So it's kind of mind blowing. It's kind of a fascinating topic. I think that's why so many people are so fascinated with Mormonism, because there's so much truth to it.
Yeah, and it's so connected to like Skinwalker Ranch and all this like ET stuff. I mean, it's like, honestly, it's such a key to so many things. Like, it's such a deep, like, it's so important. It's so important. Like it, and especially how it connects with the SRA and like how it's actually part of a bigger global system, like connected even to the Vatican. And like it's people just need people. You got to do some homework on this. Like it does affect you. It is important to know. It's important to understand this part of the chessboard is the Mormon church is like a major big piece on the chessboard, and it's connected to a lot of things. And yeah, well, let's do another. We should do another.
Yeah, let's definitely do
it, but
all that.
we should do a whole show on it because I've read a few books on it, and I can definitely talk about some of the stuff going on in Canada and compare it. But yeah, it's big. It's big.
Yeah. Well, and it'll be interesting because you having an outsider view and not having been brainwashed by it like I was, but then me having an insider view, I think we can provide kind of a good consensus and picture of what's going on there. So we'll get to another episode on that. But anyway, well, thanks for chatting with me today and putting this together. And I really appreciate your time and wisdom that you have to offer. And hopefully, people learned something today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love talking with you too. I knew as soon as I saw you on the show, I'm like, oh, we're gonna be friends. I gotta contact her. We gotta talk. She understands a lot of stuff that I can't even really talk to other people about. So I was really like, thank you for having me on the show. And I really hope we can do another one we should just do one straight on Mormons. But I think that's probably enough for today. I think we're almost like a few hours.
Yeah, for sure. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Jaymee. We'll connect again very soon. All right. Take care.